Today I'm going to talk about the Apod. The Apod is the Annual Property Operating Data Sheet. And as far as I'm concerned, right now this form is probably one of the most important forms in establishing net operating income. And that's what we're trying to do when we look at any property that has income, any investment. We're trying to get down to the net operating income, because your future cash flow analysis, where you do your projections, are based on a proper and true net operating income. Now there's 5 things on the Apod, and 3 of those things must be true, and we're going to talk about that just a little bit. Now we all know this. We know that this is an investment, and investments are treated different than what a residential property is that is owner occupied. In fact, you want to make a profit. That's why you call it an investment. You want to get a rate of return. You want to be able to sell it for more than you gave for it. And so an investment comes with its own set of criteria. And one of the most important things in this set of criteria is discovering the NOI. That's paramount. That's what it's all about, is net operating income, because everything else depends on net operating income. Now, when you go to a meeting like NCE and you use projected income, all the brokers have to go through that wall that you have portrayed of what this property could be. When we're at a meeting, we want to know what the value of the investment is to our client. When you sit down with your clients, that's when you go through the cash flow analysis and you do your projections and you run the property out 3, 5, or 10 years. So net operating income is very important, and we need it to be true and actual. Now you can see that I've got on my screen a sheet from Bob Steele, one of the greatest exchangers I think there is in the marketplace today. And you see down toward the middle of the page, it says no cap rates, no projections allowed, only actual income and expenses. And this is very true in previous meetings. No cap rates, no projections allowed, only actual income and expenses. And there's a lot of obvious reasons for that, because projections are just untrue. They're hard to measure. You are very seldom ever correct. And there's a lot of things that go into projections. A lot of things I see about projections is brokers tend to change the income, but never change the expenses. And so projected income just does not work well. Banks do not accept that. They want to know what the actual NOI is. They base their appraisals. Everything else is based on the net operating income. I think most of us have memorized this form. Gross income, we know it's just the market rate times the number of units. Very seldom is that ever true. You can add your other income, but if you add income, you need to be sure and take care of it in the expenses. Less vacancy and credit, that's market driven. I get sellers say, well, I've never had a vacancy. This thing is full all the time. And even at the meetings, we see where brokers do not use a vacancy factor. If you go to a lender is going to require a vacancy factor. Can be 5, 6, 7%, but they will definitely plug in a vacancy factor. And the reason is because over a 3 to 5 year period, you will not get 100% of your income. You got people moving in, moving out, you got prorated rent, you got renovations, you got units down, you got plumbing repairs. There's some reason that you don't get 100% of the income all the time in most rentals. And so that's market driven and it's seldom accurate. Everybody's got a quote on what the vacancy factor should be. But vacancy factor can change from building to building, from block to block, and from neighborhood to neighborhood. So it's not very accurate, but it is required. Now, effective gross income has to be true. And where do you get that? You get that from the owner's tax records. And so the owner gives you those tax returns and those records that show the income and expenses, and you need to pull out of those records the actual income and the actual expenses that pertain to the operation of that property. A lot of times owners will plug in things like cell phones and truck insurance and car insurance, their personal resident insurance, and trying to build up those expenses so they can get more deductions. It just doesn't work that way. So operating expenses must be true. Effective gross income must be true. And if those two are true, then you know that net operating income is true. A plus B equals C. And net operating income is what you want to be true. Now, recently, a friend of mine presented a syndication class, and in that class, he says that the thing they look for in the Apod: taxes, insurance, management, maintenance, utilities, and repairs. And when you've got those things in your Apod, that's what you want, is because you want to understand how that property is operating and what it takes to operate that property. And so when you have those and you don't have the other things that brokers plug in there, you'll get a true NOI. You don't put amortization in a Apod. You don't put interest deductions on the Apod. You do not put reserves on the Apod. And neither do you put your cell phone bill or your truck insurance or anything like that. And when you get those tax statements from your owner, pull out all those things that are not necessary to run that building. I've seen a lot of different things that's plugged into an Apod, and I've even seen brokers put the Apod out to the public, advertising a cap rate, and their expenses be totally wrong. And so the NOI is wrong because the NOI is usually low if you take out a lot of expenses that are not generic to the property. So it can be very critical that you get proper NOI. Now, I have circled some of the things on the operating expenses that must be true. And remember, don't put things in the operating expenses like interest deduction or amortization or reserves, because those drive down your NOI, and when you got a low NOI, then your property just will not show good at all. As I said, there's 5 things in the operating statement, and 3 of those things must be true: effective gross income, operating expenses, and if those 2 are correct, then the 3rd one, net operating income, will be true. Now, here's a formula that I use all the time, very important formula, and when I go to a meeting, I usually just scribble this on a pad so I don't have to keep it in my head, and then I can see the net operating income, and then I can determine a rate and a value very quickly and very easily. And a lot of times when brokers present from the podium, they will have projected income, a projected net operating income, and that just makes your rate and your value just very suspect, because projected income is just not that good and it's not accurate, and the broker then is selling potential or selling upside, which we should not be doing. Now, here is a picture that I like, and I use it quite often in my videos. And here's all these brokers lined up, and they are evaluating an investment. And when you're evaluating an investment, you want good NOI, because everything is based off of the NOI. The lenders use it, the appraisers use it, other brokers use it, your sellers use it, and your buyers will definitely use it. And so what you're trying to do is take that NOI, and then later you go to your cash flow analysis and you can project that NOI out 3, 5, or 10 years and move the income and expenses around and see what that property would actually do when you have a projection. But it all starts with a true NOI. Now, look at it this way. NOI is all you have left. When you go over to the cash flow analysis sheet and you start projecting out 1, 3, 5, or 10 years, NOI is all you have. And with most of us, we have to have NOI to service the debt. Well, when you service the debt, if you look at your cash flow before tax, usually it will be drastically lower than what the NOI is because of that debt service. And so when you have debt service and then you have cash flow before tax and you have $1,000 or $500 a month left over, that cap rate does not mean that much anymore. Because let's look at it this way. If you have a 4-unit apartment complex and all the water heaters go out a week after you buy the property, then you got to spend $15,000 on water heaters. Your NOI has just left the town. You are now having to come out of pocket to be able to make those major unexpected repairs, and that happens quite often. Your NOI will be wiped out and your profit will go along with that. You won't have enough money to make capital improvements, which you should be making all along. And so to make a profit when your margins are real close is very difficult. You may and you may not, depends on the quality of the units when you bought them. And it's up to you, the new owner, to make the profit. And that's why it's so important that as brokers that we don't try to sell potential, that we sell based on actual income and expenses that the property is doing, because the profit belongs to the person that creates the profit, which most likely is the new buyer. So we don't want to try to sell profit before it's ever developed. And that's what it is when you sell projected income. Thanks for watching. This has been a short video on the Apod, one of the most important documents in the cash flow analysis process.